To our top story this morning, Kerala continues to be at the centre of the COVID spike in the country. The state has recorded over 20,000 daily cases for the fifth straight day, raising alarm bells now as India braces for a third wave. Kerala's positivity rate has been hovering between 12 and 13%, falling in centre's list of cause for concern. The state government ordered a weekend lockdown to curb relentless spike in the cases. Government also issued a fresh order stating that micro-containment zones need to be set up in all the places where the cluster of cases is being observed. Centre has also issued guidelines to Kerala and 9 other states. These states include Kerala, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Odisha, Assam, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Andhra Pradesh and Manipur. The centre had a series of advisories for these 10 states, imposing strict restrictions in all districts over 10% positivity rate and preventing crowding in these districts. Centre has also advised states to ramp up COVID testing and vaccination. And there is a lot of conversation about the Kerala model. Is this the failure of the Kerala model or not? Our next report is going to tell you all about it. Take a look.
Is the state really failing? Is the Kerala model a much hyped illusion? For the last 2 days in a row now, more than 22,000 cases have been reported every single day from Kerala. This accounts for 50% of India's new cases. India Today has delved deep into the COVID figures from Kerala to try and find out if Kerala's handling of the virus is flawed. To be fair to the state, the centre's own data shows that Kerala is not underreporting cases, a certificate that has not been given to many other states. There is least underreporting in Kerala and Maharashtra.
The Sero survey clearly shows that, Kerala's Sero prevalence is only 44.4% compared to the national average of 67%. And, how we estimate this undercounting factor is, you look at the date on which this survey was concluded, and you can actually see, the actual reported cases by each of these states. There are 21 states in which this survey was conducted. So based on the Sero prevalence at that time, you can actually have an estimate of what should have been the actual number of cases that should have been reported by the states. And then you compare that with the actual reported cases. And you can actually see, when you do that exercise for 21 states, you can see that Kerala was able to, through its testing and tracing and tracking, the state was able to record 1 in every 6 expected cases.
Experts also argue that most people in Kerala are still vulnerable to the infection, as proven by the low sero prevalence in the state.
A pandemic is like a fire. The brown trees represent the vulnerable people. That is, people who don't have immunity yet. Which means that the more the number of vulnerable people in a region and the more densely populated the area, the more the wildfire will spread or more the pandemic will spread. What matters is not to let the fire burn out of control. And at this point, as expected, there is an increase in the number of reported cases in Kerala after lockdown has been relaxed.
While the latest Sero survey has shown a national average of 67.7%, and states like Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Bihar have shown more than 75% with antibodies, Kerala's sero positivity is just 44.4%. The Kerala government maintains that it is because of the resilience of its healthcare system that cases in the deep interiors of the state are now getting detected. But experts are not ready to give the state government a complete clean sheet.
Kerala had lower sero prevalence to begin with. Therefore, people were at higher risk of getting the infection and spreading more. In addition to this, the testing levels dropped compared to May in the month of June drastically. Adding to all these problems were a series of super spreader events. There is definitely laxity in contact tracing and some of the public health measures that Kerala took leadership very early on.
Kerala detected 1 case out of every 6 infections against a national average of 1 case for every 33 infections. The state's vaccination numbers incidentally are better than the national average, 16.3% against 7.4%. One-dose coverage stands at 37.8% against a national average of 26.4%. The death rate is also lower than the national average. In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today.
With the poll bugle for 2022 Uttar Pradesh battle already sounded, Union Home Minister Amit Shah is going to be visiting the state, wherein he will lay the foundation stone of several big-ticket development projects. Amit Shah is scheduled to arrive in Lucknow by 11 a.m. He's going to be laying the foundation stone of Uttar Pradesh Institute of Forensic Sciences. In the evening, he's also going to be laying foundation stone of Vindhyavasini Corridor project in Mirzapur. And after that, he's going to be offering prayers at the Kashi Vishwanath temple. His visit is coming at a time when the Saffron Party has maximized its preparation for the big UP Mahayuddh. India Today has accessed the blueprint of his plan to better its 2016-17 feat. The BJP is zeroed in on 80 assembly seats, which have never been won by it. Assembly seats in Raebareli, Akbarpur, Etawah are on the BJP's radar now. Caste politics has peaked just before the 2022 Uttar Pradesh Assembly polls. The BSP, BJP and Congress, every single party is trying to woo the Brahmin voters. In the latest, BSP has launched a scathing attack on the BJP, terming the Saffron Party as Brahmin killer. Here's more.
With less than a year for Uttar Pradesh Assembly elections, Brahmin votes are in full demand. BSP, SP and Congress are trying to woo the community. Bahujan Samaj Party is facing existential crisis ahead of 2022 Assembly polls. While addressing a Brahmin meet in Amethi, BSP Rajya Sabha MP Satish Chandra Mishra launched a scathing attack on Yogi government for targeting and oppressing Brahmins in the state.
देखा किस तरीके से ब्राह्मण समाज के एक व्यक्ति को जब मारा इन्होंने, और मारा भी कानून, कोई आदेश नहीं, सरकारी आदेश नहीं है, हाईकोर्ट का आदेश नहीं है, न्यायालय में नहीं ले गए, लेकिन गाड़ी पलटती है, मार देते हैं। ठीक है, आप कहते हैं कि उसने गलत काम किया था, लेकिन बाकी लोगों ने क्या किया था?
Glorification of gangster Vikas Dubey has led to strong counter-attack from not just ruling BJP but also Samajwadi Party and Congress.
अब चुनाव आ गए हैं तो ये कहीं न कहीं इन सारी जातियों को, धर्मों को एक दूसरे से लड़ा करके चुनाव लड़ना चाहते हैं। पिछले 5 साल में जनता ये जरूर पूछेगी आदरणीय मिश्रा जी, सुश्री मायावती जी, कि आपने जनता के हितों की कितनी लड़ाई लड़ी।
सुश्री मायावती जी के आइकॉन कभी मुख्तार अंसारी होते हैं तो कभी विकास दुबे होते हैं। उत्तर प्रदेश में अपराधियों के विरुद्ध और उनके संपत्ति के विरुद्ध जो अभियान चल रहा है, उससे दोनों दल व्यथित हैं।
बहुजन समाज पार्टी अब ब्राह्मणों के हित की बात कर रही है। मुझे लगता है जब अन्याय हो रहा था उनके खिलाफ, तब सिर्फ समाजवादी पार्टी बोल रही थी, सड़क से लेकर सदन तक, तभी सारे दल नहीं दिखाई दे रहे थे।
BSP is repeating its strategy of 2007 assembly polls to achieve a majority in the state by consolidating Brahmin votes. The party has lined up Brahmin Sammelans in the coming weeks across the state. BSP has also vowed to expedite the construction work of Ram Temple. BSP is clearly fishing in troubled waters, and 2007 Encore is an uphill task due to dearth of Brahmin leaders in BSP.
The opposition, including BJP, are also questioning that this is the same Mayawati who had sentiments in Mukhtar Ansari case or Vikas Dubey case, and now seeing the Uttar Pradesh elections on the doors, they are trying to woo the Brahmin voters and trying to form the government with the help of Dalits and Brahmins. With cameraman Sanjay Samarth Srivastava for India Today.
BJP leader and former Union Minister Babul Supriyo has announced his decision to quit politics. Initially, Supriyo posted on Facebook that he was a team player and not going to join any political party, but later the portion was edited out. His new post has now fueled speculation that he could be jumping ship. Babul Supriyo has linked his decision of quitting politics to losing his ministerial portfolio. Here's more coming in.
Singer-turned-politician Babul Supriyo, who served as a union minister, announces his decision to quit politics. Putting an end to all the speculations, the BJP leader posted his farewell message on Facebook. He first wrote, and I quote, "Alvida, I am not going to join any political party. TMC, Congress, CPIM, nobody has called me. I am not going anywhere. One needs not to be in politics to do social work." But later, Babul Supriyo changed his mind and edited his Facebook post. He deleted the paragraph where he wrote that he is not going to join TMC, Congress or CPM. The change in the post has now fueled speculation that he could be jumping ship. Babul also admitted to the differences with the BJP before the Bengal elections. And while accepted some blame for it, he also alleged that others were responsible for the rift. Not holding back, Babul Supriyo also linked his decision of quitting politics to losing his ministerial portfolio in the recent Modi cabinet reshuffle. The two-time member of parliament was among the 12 ministers who were dropped from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's cabinet on July 7th.
Please don't embarrass me. I really don't have any comments to make. Please let me keep my dignity. I don't want to say a single word.
Babul's fate was likely sealed when he lost to the Trinamool Congress Arup Biswas in the April-May West Bengal Assembly elections. In parting, the Asansol MP in his post said that he wanted to concentrate on social service. Reacting to it, Bengal BJP chief Dilip Ghosh said this was Babul's personal decision. Babul Supriyo is the second high-profile leader after Mukul Roy to quit post the party's defeat in the assembly polls. The big question is, will this lead to more churn in Bengal BJP? Bureau Report, India Today.
A small village in Tamil Nadu's Madurai district ditched their ages-old tradition, allowing around 50 people from the Dalit community to enter the Pekkaman Kapuswamy temple for the first time. Piramalai Kalars, a non-Dalit community, reportedly denied their entry into this temple located in the Thirumangalam town. After years of oppression, one of the villagers approached Madras High Court against the discrimination. The court has ordered district administration to take action, after which Dalit community members were allowed to enter the temple on Saturday. The entire country had their eyes on TV screens, hoping for their daughter PV Sindhu to create history. Sindhu, the silver medalist from the last games, could have at least matched her feat from the previous Olympics that she had defeated Chinese counterpart. But it did not quite happen for India's #1 shuttler. Here's how it all panned out.
Heartbreak. All of India felt a jolt when PV Sindhu lost her semi-final match in Tokyo. India's ace shuttler was looking to go the distance this time after her silver medal at the 2016 Olympics. But it wasn't meant to be. Her nemesis, Chinese Taipei's Tai Tzu Ying, was standing in her way. And Tzu Ying, who had lost to Sindhu at Rio, had her revenge in Tokyo. Despite taking the lead in the first game, Sindhu just couldn't capitalize. And Tzu Ying made a roaring comeback to win the game 21-18. She brought out her best in the second game, and her back-end drops troubled India's #1 time and again. Sindhu's father, PV Ramana, too felt that Tzu Ying didn't let his daughter dictate the game at all.
When a player couldn't come into the rhythm, so obviously this all happens. So yesterday she was in a good rhythm, so she was able to, come back to the normal game, and she could catch Yamaguchi. Today, Tai Tzu has not given her any chance at all.
the world #1 player Zhu Ying breezed through the second game, winning it 21-12. Sindhu, who hadn't dropped a single game all through the Olympics, had lost 2 in a row. While it was another disappointing result for the Indians, all is not lost. Sindhu still has a chance of winning a bronze for India, but it won't come easy. Her father also wants her to be in the best shape possible for the third place match.
You have to prepare for the bronze medal, so tomorrow, and let's see how she plays, because the other side, Hee Bing-jo, is not a easy player. You have seen the match today. She is also very tricky player, and Sindhu has to really concentrate and play well tomorrow.
Sindhu will face China's Hee Bing-jo, and all of India will be hoping that she manages to come out of the game with a medal at least. Sports Bureau India Today.
Another Olympics, another disappointing show in archery. Not a single Indian archer managed to reach the semi-finals. The world #1, Deepika Kumari's quarter-final finish, the furthest India could go. And now, in the aftermath of the underwhelming results, it's the athletes who are blaming the Archery Association for their failure to win a medal. Take a look.
After a poor show in archery at the Olympics, the blame game has begun. The husband-wife pair of Deepika Kumari and Atanu Das have hit out at the Archery Association of India, claiming they both should have contested the mixed pair event together. In an exclusive conversation with India Today, world #1 women archer Deepika claimed that the association's decision to pair her up with Praveen Jadhav was wrong, and that a combination and coordination with her husband Atanu Das would have fetched India a medal.
See, ये बात खत्म हो चुकी है, अभी हम कुछ कर नहीं सकते इस मामले में, बट हाँ, अगर उस वक्त वो स्ट्रांगली डिसीजन लिया जाता तो माइट बी आज सिचुएशन कुछ अलग होती।
आपको लगता है कि एक बेटर चांस था हमारा ओलंपिक्स में मेडल का?
ऑब्वियसली, क्योंकि क्या होता है ना कि एक पोडियम फिनिशिंग होता है, एक बंदे के अंदर एक क्वालिटी होती है जो एक बंदे ने डेवलप की होती है, एंड टीम कोऑर्डिनेशन होता है, कम्युनिकेशन होता है, which is very important.
Deepika and Atanu, who won the gold medal at the Paris World Cup, were expected to pair up at the Olympics as well. But Praveen Jadhav's better finish in 31st place ahead of Atanu's 35th in the individual ranking round for men meant that he was selected ahead of Atanu. India had a disastrous campaign in archery. World #1 Deepika, who has long been touted as India's biggest medal hope in archery history, faltered on the big stage yet again. Deepika crashed out in the quarterfinals, losing to South Korea's An San, who went on to win her 3rd Olympic gold at the Tokyo Olympics. India's top-ranked male archer Atanu Das, on the other hand, couldn't progress past the round of 16. He lost to 2012 London silver medalist Japan's Furukawa. Atanu told India Today that the athletes take the Olympics too seriously, and while they win at World Cups and other championships, nobody knows about them. And at the Olympics, everyone is watching, and that puts a lot of pressure on the athletes.
हमेशा ओलंपिक्स में जो है सरप्राइजेस मिलते रहते हैं हर दिन का, सो मैंने अपना पूरा कोशिश किया, जोर लगाया, बट नहीं हो पाया, सो देखते हैं आगे.
While it is true, the pressure of the Olympics is very different and expectations can take a toll, but that is how champions emerge out of the shadows. Those who handle the pressure survive. Those who don't crumble. Like shooting, archery promised a lot, but failed to deliver at the world's biggest stage. Sports Bureau India Today.